Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and get ready for some Buzzfeed, some Tuck Carlson, some Dick Carlson. Oh no! Are we demonetized out of the gates? We might be. The coming Armageddon, World War III, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to do it all with my good friend and guest, Robbie Martin. It's been a while, Robbie. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back on your program, Jason.
You know, I missed the debates last night. It's the first one that I didn't sit through. I hadn't been to the gym in like 2+ months, and I had the opportunity to go. And when there's just no beefcake left, I was like, you know what? I can skip this one. It's CNN. There's no Yang. There's no Tulsi. They've even narrowed it so Booker's not there. It's full bootlicker, grandma oatmeal, Joey B show. And, you know, I didn't do it. Did you catch any of the debates last night?
I DVR'd it and I watched it a couple hours later, and yeah, it was pretty goddamn boring. I mean,
Was it
all
brutal?
around.
I mean, I expected that one to be like the most brutal one. Like, I sit there and take notes usually. And
There was a lot of Iran talk, so it was less. I was a little bit more in my wheelhouse subject-wise than a typical debate, but yeah, it was pretty brutal. I mean, Wolf Blitzer was the host, and he was surrounded by two people I've never seen before. So, yeah, I mean, you could probably already picture how it played out.
how it went. I mean, I'm going to try to cover that. But from now on, you know, one of my hesitations about live streaming with those is the fact that I might get kicked off of YouTube right there. You know, you get one of those copyright strikes while you live stream a month out, and I can't do it. And that's crazy to me, right? So what I'm doing is I have this news site is Rockfin. So for things like that, including tonight's UFC press conference, which is live in a couple hours, I am going to be streaming that live for premium members with my reaction to the Conor McGregor violent sexual assault rape cover-up. That's way later, but this platform's allowing me to do it, and I think that that's a good way to diversify. If you want to check out Robbie's stuff, MediaRoots.org is the site that he maintains with his sister Abby. They also do a great podcast. You can also check out a very heavy agenda.com and a very heavy agenda YouTube page where Robbie, I'm pretty disappointed that I didn't get the invite for the Double Dragon 3 MAME game today. As I've noticed that the new format is to live stream video games while talking geopolitics and mostly old school games right now, correct?
Yeah, we're going through all the classic arcade games from like 1980 to the late 90s. So yeah, it's kind of an experimental approach so far, but people seem to be digging it, so I'm going to keep doing it. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And Double Dragon 3 is kind of a shitty game. I don't know if you've ever played the arcade game.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. How dare you shit on the lovely side-scrolling series that was Double Dragon, which was very beholden to my heart. Really, the third one just tried to incorporate more enemies and some like extra special moves with the kicks, I noticed, right? Like the wheel kick. But I do remember the SNES port kind of being a big deal. And it wasn't until, I think, Double Dragon versus Battletoads that we got a sequel to that. A well-deserved sequel, might I add. And currently, I am waiting for the Streets of Rage HD release in the vein of Double Dragon. Because as you know, Robbie, I'm sure, Sega could not really get the license for the Genesis for some of these things, and they wanted a competitor, a first-party competitor, and that would be Streets of Rage. You a Streets of Rage guy?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with an SNES, so I only played Streets of Rage at my friend's house. But yeah, totally. I mean, the music especially. It's like it's like Genesis techno music, basically.
Well, you know what I really like about it is I can play it with my nieces. They're 9 and 10, right? And we've got the portable Genesis where it's on there too. You know, those little ones that were selling at Rite Aid or whatever. And I actually have an SD card at Reed. You got to get one of the 2 to 4 gigabyte ones, so it has the entire Genesis collection on it. You only play one player, but then I also have it in the Genesis Classics on the Xbox, and we can side scroll it. And there's women they can play as, and there's also women enemies. Now that was another kind of key thing that you didn't see in a lot of series that you did see in Double Dragon, the original. I think that's like a 1987 release. I remember playing that with my father in the arcade, and like literally mid-level one, there are these chicks with the bouncing bosoms and the crazy whips and like the Jane Fonda jumpsuits. It's good stuff, man. A little nostalgia before we go hard here over on the Info Warrior with Robbie Martin. So
yeah, also wait, I always want to name drop the game Cadillacs and Dinosaurs for people who haven't played it. That's another beat 'em up game.
Now, but was Cadillacs and Dinosaurs based on the Dark Horse comic or the other way around? Or nothing to do with each other?
No, it was based on some kind of comic, either Dark Horse or Malibu or something.
I think it was Dark Horse for sure, because Malibu existed in the Image era. That's where they came up. Yeah, they were kind of like, now we're really dorking out. Okay. So, you brought this article to my attention today, and you had also been posting about the Tuckster. Buzzfeed reporting Fox News hosts were against a ground war with Iran. Trump listened. And you noted the authors, Rosie Gray and Miriam Elder. So before we even break that down, tell us who they are.
Well, yeah, that was when I first saw this article being posted around Twitter, I didn't even realize who the authors were. But Rosie Gray is either the current or former girlfriend of Eli Lake. And Eli Lake is an interesting figure. He was someone that played a role in a very heavy agenda, mostly part 2. He was heavily involved in spreading anti-Russian hysteria and fear-mongering and essentially lies about Russia, trying to stir the pot up about that really early on in the game. So if you go back to Eli Lake's reporting from around, even back to like 2012 or even earlier than that, I feel like you'll find stuff where he's writing about Russia in ways that are sort of very pioneering the Cold War 2.0 mindset. And that's partly why I made a film in the second part of A Very Heavy Agenda, partly why I called it How We Learn to Stop Worrying and Love the New Neocons. Because Eli Lake, I saw as one of these new generation of neocons, a younger sort of breed of neocon who was pushing this idea of, basically why we should hate Russia. And just some specific examples so people can have some meat to chew into here is that he was one of the people out there, and I think he actually was one of the exclusive sources for this story when the Ukraine situation first exploded between Russian separatists and Ukrainian, fighters and whatever. He actually was writing that Russian troops were amassing on the border to amounts that were over the hundreds of thousands. So he wasn't just saying that some Russian troops were waiting on the border or whatever. He was literally saying, putting out stuff without showing the satellite imagery, because that would have been the classic, sort of Reagan-Bush era version of this. But
wait. Reagan-Bush era? Bush, Clinton, Bush era. Yeah. Come on, let's be fair. Like
for some reason, I think of Kuwait though. You know how they showed them apparently the maps to the whatever.
Well, I mean, you could go to Colin Powell's Weapons of Mass Destruction presentation, right? And then I could take it even further than that and go to John Bolton when he was showing the Iranian nuclear sites that they bombed in North Korea. Remember that as well. So really, I mean, this is a one-trick pony they've been rolling out for quite some time. By the way, I want to say thank you to Flick Off for that awesome super chat sticker. I'm sorry I interrupted you there, but I had to. Continue, Robbie.
No, I mean, so yeah, the whole satellite imagery, all that stuff. Yeah, you kind of. I actually lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine. We were talking about the authors and them rolling that kind of evidence out, and now kind of getting. Let's just get into the article, right? Okay. So the article, Tucker, is basically kind of being pushed up by BuzzFeed, which is a little bit incredible, but at the same time, man, you know how I feel about this. I mean, the lone voice in the wilderness of the mainstream media seems to be Tucker Carlson when it comes to reason on foreign policy. We've had a complete media blackout, at least mainstream media blackout, and pretty much an alternative media blackout on the OPCW documents other than Tucker Carlson. If you had come to me during the 2004 election. I know a long time ago to all you millennials out there that are watching. I know there's like 2.4% of you, but whatever. If you were there. At that time, if you had told me that Tucker Carlson, who at the time was, I think was still at MSNBC, wearing a bow tie, still cheering on the war on terror, was going to support the leaks that proved that we either committed a false flag attack to maintain our presence and really, I guess, not promote it, but incur more of our presence. I mean, we fucking shot missiles into there, right? In Syria after a proven CIA operation under a different administration to go in. If you told me that Tucker Carlson was the only guy in the media at all that was going to talk about those documents, I would have been like, fuck you. Just straight up, no fucking way. Is Schwarzenegger president too? I mean, do we have Vice President Himmler under Schwarzenegger? Did he resurrect him from the dead from some kind of like bio program? I mean, that's the level of fucking bizarre it would have been for me to like believe that in 2004. Yet here we are, dude. So what do you think about this article? And then I want you to get into like the Tuck's roots and especially his father, who's essentially, this, I guess, media intelligence think tank predecessor to a neocon.
Yeah, I mean, the article in and of itself is kind of similar to the last article. I think you and I also did an episode on your show about this, how Tuck's show, Trump watched it, and I guess they had a phone call or two. This is sometime back in, I want to say June.
I remember us having that conversation.
Around the time when the drone was shot down.
Yeah, I remember that conversation, sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is almost kind of a repeat of that same article. I don't know how significant it is that Rosie Gray and Miriam Elder are writing this, but they're definitely neocon-associated writers for BuzzFeed. They've long been pushing weird neocon propaganda in various forms. So that's strange. They say they have a source that knows that Trump, watched the Tucker show. I don't know what kind of source that would be. That's kind of curious. But on the other hand, so I think you have several things going on here. So on one hand, we could take it all at face value and say, he is the most anti-war person on any mainstream media network on TV, and this is good. So that's, I think, how a lot of people are interpreting it. Mm-hmm. That's one way to interpret it. Another way to interpret it is that he's playing or pushing some kind of limited hangout operation version of the truth, dropping, kernels of truth or parts of the truth in order to obscure other parts of the truth. Mm-hmm. And, not to be too silly about this, but I mean, there could be sort of like a different version of Tucker who sort of goes under the name Cucker Charleston, like a deep state.
You need the Cucker in there. I don't know if you can cuck the Tuck right now, bro. I don't know if you're trying.
So what I'm saying is, and then on top of that, I think it's interesting too that he has admitted, to some degree, and actually some listener of Media Roots called this narrative management. In the first chapter of his new book, he actually puts Bill Kristol on the cover, making him look like a fool in cartoon drawing form, like a caricature of him. In the first chapter of his book, he admits that he once sort of associated in the same corridors of DC and in media with people like Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan and Max Boot. And then now he really just sort of despises what they stand for. That's an interesting form of narrative management, because what he doesn't directly mention in the opening chapter of that book is that he literally wrote for the Weekly Standard for like over 10 years. He wrote alongside people like Elliot Abrams. And he also doesn't mention, which Kristol I find was his
mentor, by the way. I mean, kind of openly. I mean, Kristol was his mentor.
Well, sure. So on one hand, you could say, okay, well, he's distanced himself from him, and he's written a chapter in his book saying, hey, I don't like these guys anymore, and I know them really well, so I can be really informed about why you shouldn't like them either, and like give you a really inside perspective. But it's also interesting that Tucker has now adopted sort of the lingo that a lot of other sort of more right-leaning conspiracy people have recently adopted about the deep state. Mm-hmm. So Tucker talks about the deep state. quite often now, as does Sean Hannity, which is very ironic.
I know,
But
that bothers me.
yes, but Tucker didn't mention in his book, as far as I know, that his father, Dick Carlson, was actually a pretty significant aspect of the deep state during the Reagan era, specifically, and during the post 9/11 era, in two different capacities. So I'll explain. In the 80s, Dick Carlson was actually the director of Voice of America. And according to Wikipedia, he was the longest running director in Voice of America's 50-year history. So for people who don't know what Voice of America is, it was essentially a CIA-funded cutout media outlet that was being broadcasted to other countries around the world. So it was a U.S. state-funded media outlet. Tucker Carlson's father was the longest running director of that media outlet. And then after 9/11, Tucker Carlson's father, Dick Carlson, became the vice chairman of a neocon think tank in D.C. that I would say is on par with PNAC, maybe equally as dangerous, called the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Now, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, one of its primary goals has always been regime change in Iran. And other members of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies include Richard Pearl, Michael Ledeen, James Woolsey, Sebastian Gorka, guys who have been on the media a lot recently during all this Iran stuff.
Wait a minute. You mean Richard Pearl, the so-called Prince of Darkness, isn't somebody you look to for political advice? Huh.
No, Jason, no.
Well, that's surprising. I'm very surprised.
Yeah, he's one of the only people on record, actually, besides Robert Kagan's father, Don Kagan, to predict the anthrax attacks before they happened. So that's
I did not know that
about Richard Pearl.
Well, I mean, Richard Pearl was part of the pardons. He literally was part of the pardons where these guys got caught in. I mean, Casper Weinberger was one of them too, right? I'm pretty sure. These top level guys at the heart of like Iran Contra. And I don't know if you caught it, but about a week ago, all these people were on me because I got upset about, the fact that we might have just started World War III by drone bombing Soleimani. Somebody.
Got upset with you about that?
What's that?
People got upset with you about
that? I
that?
lost like 200 subscribers on my video on it, of me showing Pompeo laughing about saying he was in the CIA and we lied, we cheated, we stole. And the funny thing about that is, like, Snopes has a whole article on that, and they're like, well, he didn't really say it to RT. Like, that makes a fucking difference. He said it in front of a university. Literally, that's the Snopes article. I mean, they don't correct what he said and meant. And so I did that, and then I got really upset because everybody's still out there who believes that we got to trust the plan and Bill Barr is going to come and save the world and people are going to jail and all the Johnny nonsense out there. I decided to finally go look at the era where he was up to be the Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. So instead of going into the hearings, I found this C-SPAN piece, which was a call-in piece after this roundtable. Now, ironically, the roundtable, which was only about 10 minutes, guess who the roundtable was headed up? And they only mention that not only is Bill Barr going to get the job, but just so you know, there wasn't even a vote. In other words, it was the yays and the nays. And you know who stood up there at the end of this thing, at the actual hearing? I also play this, and talked about how great Bill Barr was and how that they didn't even need a formal vote, and he was like the best thing since breakfast. Take a guess who that person was.
Cheney?
Joe Biden. Joe Biden
Nice.
didn't even want to vote on Attorney General Barr the first time around. That's not a fucking
every
joke.
day Joe Biden gets worse.
Oh, okay. So now going back to the round table, before we get into like what reveals who Bill Barr is, and this is like a 50-minute deep dive, which includes at the end like 20 minutes of my film Invisible Empire to kind of wrap it in together. It's Ted Olson. Remember Ted Olson from 9/11, whose wife Barbara dies, and he is the sole person that we have information of box cutters and red bandanas. He's the guy. I mean, that's where we got that information from. His wife told him that. So Ted Olson, I think he was like the Secretary General at the time, he leads into this call-in show with a reporter for the LA Times. During the revelations of what Bill Barr's been up to, other than the fact that he was in the CIA for 4 years, right out of high school, basically, and got his full-time law degree at Columbia while being at the CIA. He was doing, he also ended up doing Manuel Noriega. He did the write-up to go into that country and kidnap him and bring him back. So all this is in there. Yes.
Whoa, wait a second, stop. That's really interesting because Rudy Giuliani's law firm in the 1980s represented Manuel Noriega as his defense attorney.
Well, guess what? Bill Barr is credited with writing that, and he's asked about it during the hearings. We're not done. So they also have to bring up the BCCI banking scandal, and that's kind of why I got off in this tangent when you were talking about Pearl. And I was talking about Weinberger and Iran-Contra, because that network was funneling their money through there. That's where the cartels were funneling their money. That's where the arms dealers were funneling that money. That's where the Bin Laden network was funneling their money. Anybody can type in BCCI and Bin Laden. And it pointed at who? Neil Bush. Neil Bush and friends. But Neil Bush and friends, they didn't get in trouble. I promise you that. Well, guess who was writing up the stuff that was going to go after them? It was not only Robert Mueller at the time, who was in the Department of Justice, but his good buddy, Bill Barr, working hand in hand together to whitewash the BCCI scandal. I encourage you to go check that one out. And I know a lot of you in my audience have checked it out, but that's why we have these discussions, because I can't follow everything. Robbie's a lot more well-versed in modern-day neocons than I am. But every once in a while, I find a little piece of gold, and I throw that nugget of truth in there. And we can come together and say, look, this thing's been around for a long time, and it is alarming that Dick Carlson really was a part of that think tank network a la PNAC, right? Tell us about that.
Well, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies is funded by defense contractors. It's funded by a lot of these other weird philanthropy groups that almost seem like cutouts of aspects of the U.S. government. And it's also funded in part by the Israeli government, and that's all been disclosed. There's a great website called Loblog, ran by Jim Loeb, and writers Eli Clifton and a few other people have been really tracking the Foundation for Defense of Democracy since the early 2000s, as well as PNAC. But right now, Foundation for Defense of Democracy specifically seems to be having a huge influence on whatever's happening inside the Trump White House on Iran. And that's particularly scary, Jason, because, you know, we like to, and I think that this is part of the biggest problem with the QAnon and trust the plan and even trusting William Barr and that he's going to take down the deep state.
The guy, by the way, that's telling us that Epstein killed himself. Continue.
Sure. So it's taking our eye off the ball here. Roll the clock back to the conspiracy era circa 2007. If the Bush administration just murdered an Iranian general and was starting to say that imminent attacks were about to happen in this country or against American soldiers, I feel like the conspiracy movement would be a lot more on high alert and be saying, we got to be really careful right now that there might be some kind of mass casualty false flag event to be blamed on Iran to get us into war. And also, guess what? We already had 9/11. We were already on the brink of full fascism after that. Another 9/11 will tilt full fascism. And if they wanted Trump to be the new Hitler and the Democrats were all saying he was going to become the new Hitler, they might troll him. They might have already helped push him in that direction. So if another 9/11 happens, that could be that moment where Trump decides to become the new Hitler. And I'm not trying to say that hyperbolically. George W. Bush was almost the new Hitler. I feel like if things got a little bit worse. You could argue
that even though, he wasn't a charismatic leader, that the machine behind him used a Hitler-esque tact to launch this whole thing, right? Like their Reichstag fire, because it was internal. Now, the question is whether you believe let it happen on purpose or made it happen on purpose with that scenario. You now have a very real scenario where you saw millions of real Iranians out in the street and upset. So I think, and now you have a lot more viable targets. We're not just talking about the Sears Tower and the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and the Capitol, et cetera, et cetera. Now you literally have anything with Trump's name on it globally. So let's say people are on a low level are doing their job so well that the guys that were going to carry something out at one of Trump's towers or plazas or casinos, etc., right? They get caught in the United States. Well, they might not get caught in another nation where Trump has a hotel, and how easy is it going to be to obfuscate that as Iranians? And that's almost if we're lucky at this point, man, because we gotta go back. I don't think Trump did it, but this administration now on the fucking record promoted a false flag in Syria to maintain their military presence there, bare minimum. It has been proven. Nobody in our administration or otherwise has acknowledged this. The only person I have seen acknowledge this in government whatsoever, and shame on you, Rand Paul, for not talking about this, is Tulsi Gabbard on Jimmy Dore. She's it. That's all I've seen. Okay? So show me somebody else that has the cojones to start there. We're in a very dire situation. Julian Assange does not look good. He was just in court again. The man looks like he's going to die. No one's even talking about that issue. There hasn't been one person in the press since that initial question into the Trump administration on whether he's even aware of that. So
well, that's another thing, Jason.
Yeah.
People, the QAnon people have been being told to trust the plan that Julian Assange is being laundered, that he's actually safe, and that Trump is eventually at the end of all this somehow going to save him. This is partly what I mean by the danger of taking our eye off the ball here. Somehow the conspiracy movement has really lost the plot. And generally speaking, a lot more people would be concerned right now that Trump administration is eventually going to use Assange as a sacrificial lamb to again silence more journalism in this country, because that's the pathway that it was going during the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. Why all of a sudden that Trump is in, are we thinking that's not going to happen now? That's the direction that it was going, and it's going to continue to go in. We're not going to be saved at the end of this by Trump or Barr or anybody else.
And that's why I tell people we have to hold people to feet to the fire. We have to start locally. Look, man, this bail reform in New York, I know that you're on the other side of the country, but it is really affecting communities all over here. It's unbelievable. It really is, like, unbelievable. Like, people are dying, and then they're just letting people who killed people out of jail. They're giving them tickets. I had a girl run down a mile away at 7:45 on New Year's by a guy that didn't have a license, had multiple priors, had unpaid tickets up and down. All right, now normally before this, had he not run anybody down, he'd just been pulled over, his car would have been impounded, and someone would have had to get him bare minimum, right? Maybe he would have been even taken to the station. They let this guy go. This woman died a few days ago. I mean, she's dead. And that's like one of the, we had a guy rob a bank in Colony and the driver get caught, released on their own recognizance the next day. This is where we're at in New York. I mean, lawlessness, man. It's just 2020 is a weird year. Unbuttered Toast says, trust the plan, huh? Love you guys. Yeah, I don't get it, man. I grew up in the era of trust no one. I grew up watching Duchovny tell me, trust no one.
Exactly.
Going back to those pop culture references.
Except for Dean Haglund, who dropped those hints about the CIA minder and Chris Carter.
Oh, boy, we could get into that story. But you know what? I'm glad you said that, because that reminded me of the InfoWars angle I thought would be fair to end on. You know, I know you, and I think you should hold Tucker's feet to the fire, but I'd like to say that a lot of people, say, well, you worked for Alex Jones. Look, I'm very vocal about what I disagree with Alex Jones and InfoWars, and have been for years, and I present my evidence. At the same time, I don't want to see anybody deplatformed. I'm a free speech guy, etc. But I would hope that isn't my cross to bear forever, that forever whatever Alex Jones has done or said would be associated with my work, especially my documentary films, man. I think they've aged pretty well. When I watch Fabled Enemies and Invisible Empire, I'm just like, damn, those networks are still around. More and more of this is public knowledge today. And I don't know why we are where we're at. I mean, the algorithms control people, sure, but at the access of this, you can get all the information we just talked about, Robbie, right? So how do we lead people there?
I don't know. I would say in general, I'd like to see people take a broader point of view on anti-war and get back to sort of the old school way of looking at war from a moral perspective. that we shouldn't be bombing anybody. I mean, it's our fault that ISIS exists. Why is it okay to bomb them right now? I mean, I just feel that we've lost the plot in a lot of ways, and I'd like people to get back to that old school mentality. I was even talking today about how libertarians used to be so much better on anti-war in general. And, you don't see very many of them except for people like Scott Horton and Daniel McAdams and some other, libertarians really sort of pushing that old school, strong anti-war stance. And, it's so I could understand why people get into Tucker Carlson, but I think at the same time, it's also a reflection of how much there's a lack of good things out there to latch onto. And in my opinion, at times it is sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel. And, Tucker Carlson, I will give him credit for the last 2 segments he did about Iran. But, he's really not going after Trump specifically. I think he's still really giving Trump personally a pass on this. And it's time that he, if he's really serious, if he's not some kind of limited hangout operation, he needs to start putting the president's feet to the fire. People like Rand Paul need to fucking stop being cowards and put his feet to the fire. They would have put Obama's feet to the fire. So I don't, I just want to see those things shift.
I love it, Robbie. MediaRoots.org, aheavyagenda.com, a heavy agenda on YouTube. Anything else you want to tell the folks before you wrap out of here?
Yeah, just it's a very heavyagenda.com. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Fluorescent Gray, and tune into my new streaming series, which I'm going to be doing on probably every other day. Main Politics. We're already up to episode 5. You can check that out on my channel, my YouTube channel as well.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Robbie. We will see you soon, hopefully, on the next debates for sure. And maybe you join me during the next debates, and we live stream it on Rockfin, because we can get away with it, and we can be a little looser on it as well. So let's hook that up, and maybe you and Abby will get on that platform, because listen, we got to find something, and especially if we ever get deplatformed. You know what I'm saying, brother?
Sure thing, dude. Yeah, I have to check it out. I haven't checked it out yet.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again. That is Robbie Martin, half of MediaRoots.org. You can go over there right now. They do podcasts. They do a lot of great reporting. Please check them out. And again, go subscribe to his YouTube channel. I was just talking about Rockfin. And if you are a premium member over there, I've only been there this week, you're getting 5 videos that you're not going to get anywhere else, including this one where I go over the Ariel Helwani interview, and I go over McGregor's responses and body language, as well as this video on the man who led the Drag Time Story Hour protest, found dead just a couple days later. So we did 2 of those at 8 o'clock on this platform, a little over an hour and a half away, or around an hour and a half away. We're going to live stream the UFC press conference, and we're going to do what we can do there, not here, because I don't think I can get away with that over on YouTube. Thumbs this up. Subscribe. We do great interviews here. We do great content. Please, please, please consider, this is where we want, retweeting this out, exposing Conor McGregor for what he is. Cannabis Sativa, great broadcast. Thank you for helping me out with the broadcast there. So retweet that, share that with your friends and family. You can check out all my documentary films: Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, and New World Order, to find and shade the motion picture. Subscribe, join the Burmese Brigade if you are new. I want to hit 40,000 so bad. So bad. We're trying to get there. And then if you want to financially support me, guys, this is what I'm doing for a living. Think about it. 7 days a week, 3 to 7 videos, free. Without your support, I couldn't be doing this, because look at how much this stuff gets suppressed. In fact, I'll do it live, because, a lot of people don't understand. Let's go to YouTube Studio. Okay. And we'll go to Creator Studio Classic. Okay. And we'll go to Video Manager. Now, if you don't believe me that my videos are all, and sometimes now I'm having to request twice, demonetized. There you go. Okay, this one's probably demonetized. We'll go back. We'll do it live. But by the time they are remonetized, if they are, they're done. This one was the one video out of the last 8 or 9 that's been monetized. So let's go back here to this. And let's go to, oh, sorry guys. One more. See, we do it live. We do it live. Videos. We go to live. And as you can see, we've already been demonetized, and I'll request a review right here. You get to see how we do it here. So that's how we do it, guys. That's how we're trying to make a living on YouTube. That's why I need you to support me on the GoFundMe and over with exclusive content over at Rockfin. Love you. See you on the flip.